Everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio TV live stream. And today I have the lovely Hilary Ramo on the show. Hilary has joined the network recently. I just want to give a little bio on Hilary before we launch the show. Hilary is the founder of Love Breathe for Earth, a well known psychic medium, ordained non denominational minister, and master Reiki healer. She is a shamanic practitioner and an earth oracle. Hilary has her own radio show on the archive on the network here too. And without further ado, we're going to bring on today's guest and co-host. Hi, Hilary. You're very welcome back to the show.
Hi, James. Thanks.
Uh,
Hi, everybody. It's great to
great,
be here.
great to have you back. We're going to talk about altruism and egoism today. Um, Something I always try to inspire in people, and I don't just say, to people, be altruistic. It's more subtler than that, and it's more intelligent. And I just think it's a facet that makes us human. And people talk about humanitarianism, Hilary. And I know you're coming at this from an energy perspective, metaphysical. I always see you trying to inspire others to touch people, to be creative, to be good to others, and I think we need that, because I think the human race is at an unusual crossroads, and I think people are either going to make a choice to be down the egoistic route or the altruistic route, and I think people inevitably get faced with that choice. I think it's a choice people make personally, but I guess let's talk about it in a psychology sense. I mean, people say that we're hardwired for altruism. It's something I wrestle with. It's something that I love psychology, and I love philosophizing with people, and I always wonder: are we hardwired for empathy, this altruistic behavior? And I don't know. It comes down to whether you believe in a Darwinian approach, survival of the fittest, or do you believe in humanness at all costs. It's bizarre. It's counterintuitive. People think that if we go into a dangerous situation, that people think that the strongest will, if you sink in ship, that the people will, the strongest will survive, like, or whatever. But it's not that case. It's a case where you always see altruism surface in crises or devastating situations, and we'll talk about it today. Obviously, the anniversary of 9/11 today. Some, spectacular, awesome acts of altruism there as well, which we'll get into. But where do you feel on the altruism egoism issue?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'm really glad we're taking on this topic today because I think it's really relevant, especially considering today is 9/11. First, I want to talk about the definition of what is traditionally accepted. Altruism, it says here, is the principle or practice of concern for the welfare of others. It is a traditional virtue in many cultures and a core aspect of various religious traditions and secular worldviews through the concept of others toward whom concern should be directed can vary among cultures and religions. Altruism is the opposite of selfishness. And then when you look at the traditional definition of ego, it says a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance. And it can also be related to self-esteem, self-importance, self-worth, self-respect, self-image, self-confidence.
Wow.
Where I stand with this is this. I think the world needs more acts of kindness in really extreme ways, and then sometimes not so subtle. Subtle. We need subtle and we need extreme examples of kindness and altruism, and we need to be able to get into our own hearts in order to connect to the hearts of other people. So this is a healing question on some level. I also believe that every time I've come up against what I consider my ego, it has to do with that voice that tells me you're not good enough, you can't do this, you won't succeed, give up, run away. And every time I meet that voice of my ego that says, no, you're not good enough, wherever it comes from, whatever it is from my own healing process, that's part of that healing that has to take place. And each time we come up against that voice that says and challenges and confronts our ability to overcome that, it's the ego giving us an opportunity to either do it again, do it better, practice, heal and resolve those feelings that create it. I don't believe that we were created with anything that we don't need. I think nature is brilliant. I think it comes after billions of years of perfection and evolution. Why do we have an ego? Well, one, because somebody in psychology years ago decided to define it as that and label. And, as we've evolved from that, it's even taken on a life of its own in many ways. And in the New Age industry, we also have this concept that we need to get rid of the ego. The ego is bad. You have to annihilate it, get rid of it. And if you show any signs of ego, you're not a spiritually mature person, or you're judged as less spiritually mature as others, and you're often crucified for that act. So we have to really clarify, I think, in the beginning of the show, what is ego? Where are we going to, what perspective are we going to take with it? And how are we going to help maybe reshape or redefine this complicated issue? And acts of kindness come naturally. I do believe that we are ingrained to have that as part of our nature, according to traditional scientific and philosophical and psychological theories. However, I think our modern day culture and the way that our global paradigm is structured and set up, we are not nurtured in building and practicing that track within the brain, within our makeup, because we live in a competitive, egotistical type environment where we're raised in a multitude of different situations that create unique individual imprints into our psychology. And ego may manifest in different variations through that individualization. So it can't just be a blanket label or a blanket term. And so I always approach ego as it's that challenging, confrontational energy inside me that tells me I'm not good enough, or fill in the blank with some negating kind of self-talk. And the altruism helps me to overcome that, even when I do acts of kindness to myself. I mean, critical self-care is acts of kindness for oneself, taking care of your health, taking care of your relationships, taking care of your finances, taking care of whatever it is that you need to take care of, and also your spirit. So that's where I see it.
Wow. Here's the thing, we talk about being hardwired for empathy, and extreme altruism is what makes us human. That's what we always understand altruism to be. However, like you say, and I'm glad you pointed that out, that it doesn't mean you have to go save somebody's life to make you human. There as the small, subtle ways, the random acts of kindness. That's thinking of others and improving somebody else's life, however small, in every little way. You don't have to be the extreme altruism, but on the other end of the scale, you do have extreme altruism, and I wonder, in the same way you have the psychopathology, you have proto-psychopaths. People are hardwired for psychopaths, but are not necessarily psychopaths until they do certain acts and they cross the point of no return. I think there are extreme altruists that are just programmed and hardwired to be that way. So I think it's a much more complex perspective that we have to deal with of the human populace. So in a way, I mean, the most extreme altruist is the one that will go and give up their life for somebody. So that's the point of no return. That's the opposite to psychopathology, is where you will go and take somebody's life. It's an exact opposite in one respect. But it's not the only case of altruism, and there's many cases, where you can do things or improve people's lives without, it's not what we consider to be altruistic. And on the ego and getting rid of the ego, I'm glad you pointed that too, Hilary. Removing the ego seemed to be like a popular idea for a while, and I'm like, you have an ego, you're born with an ego. I look at it this way, Hilary. I don't care whether you talk about difficult people or difficult personalities. I think we're all born with a tool set and it's limited, and we're given this thing called emotion, and your tool set is whatever, your environment, your behaviorism, your parenting, your psychological makeup, your star sign, if you want to call it that. People will focus on it like that, and in a behavioral sense, you're up against it. You're up against it, and you have to almost work backwards. You have to learn how to deal with your emotions in a either good way or a positive way, and if not, you're going to deal with them in a negative way, and you will make that decision, and hopefully, you'll subjugate the ego, and the ego will dress itself down as the other you rises in life. So I think we're handicapped. We're emotionally handicapped when we're born into the world, and I look at that in an astrological sense. Some person's born with a certain star traits or whatever to be. One person's either born to be greedy or selfish or generous or creative or whatever. It doesn't really matter. You're giving this tool set, and unless you work it and philosophize it yourself and chew it up and spit it back out, you're gonna not deal with it in the right manner. And the right manner is to subjugate. And I see a lot of the world. I always look at people who subjugate their ego and who isn't. Well, you will never get rid of it. It's there, and I think it's something that should be taught in school. I don't ever get why this is some branch of philosophy or some branch of psychology that people have to learn about if they go and do some sort of a course somewhere at university. It's something everybody has. It should be like sex education. It should be given to people in schools. Everybody has an ego. If everybody was given intellectual discussions on their ego, and even in a general sense, in a schooling sense, I think that would be a great thing. I would welcome that. But you like you say, yeah, you're not going to get rid of the ego, and there has been this push that if you have an ego, then you're a bad person. I don't get that
Yeah.
myself, but I don't get it.
Well, I think it goes back to how we how we interact with our own ego, how we create in the world. And if we get stuck on this I don't know, this concept, then it ends up kind of tripping us up, I think, along the way. Children, I have to disagree with you on that one thing. I think children come through into this world clear. They have a consciousness that is filled with infinite possibilities. Imagination allows them to go into anything, anywhere, anytime. I think they have a natural access to the time-space continuum, and they can just do what they need to do. I believe the signs that they're born under, the time, the astrology is extremely significant, and I believe it also it acts as a kind of imprint. And I found something interesting a few months ago where the sound, you can somehow figure out the sound of the cosmos at the time of your birth. And I thought, well, maybe that's not true, maybe it is, I don't know. But the concept was really interesting, because if we're born under a set sign, a set time into this reality, into this world, and that comes with a sound, I think that just reiterates what I said before about that individualistic component that's really important for us to own as we grow up, nurture, and seek that kind of inner wisdom as to why. A lot of people are still wandering around in circles, myself included sometimes. Why do I have to do this? Why, what's the point? What am I supposed to do with my life? And I channel that into manifestations that I channel it to. Some people do it different. Everybody has their own way of doing it. That individual quality that some people call ego. Well, you haven't gotten out of your ego because you can't be all like everybody else. Well, guess what? You're not. I mean, you have the same technical form, the same technical manifestation, but you have a very unique gift and skill that's intertwined into that. And so how we move out into the world in moments of choice, where we have a choice where we can choose love or we can choose hate, everything that you are up until that moment, everything that you've been conditioned to believe, think, feel, say, do, makes a statement. And that statement can reveal wounds, or can reveal healing that needs to take place. It can also reveal something else, almost like a primal nature of who you are. And the ego, I think we need to make friends with the ego. I think the ego needs to become a quality in us it works with us to manifest our greatest destiny and form, and whatever that means. I mean, we don't necessarily know that, but it does come synchronistically.
Yeah, and when I meant that about kids and stuff, at that too, what you said, yeah, that everyone's born here with a clear crystal perspective, and that may get corrupted later on in life through society and this left brain culture we're born into. But I'm specifically speaking about they're emotionally handicapped because they haven't got the maturity to deal with emotions with respect to, do they affect other people and do they act it out, is what I'm trying to say. You know, they have to learn very quickly and very fast if they are to act in accordance with, you know, a moral standpoint. You know, they have to learn morality at a very young age, and that's a difficult thing to do when you don't have the operating system. It's like, you know, it's like trying to function without an operating system, and it's difficult. So I mean, in that respect. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about 9/11. I mean, here we are today and I'm not going to focus on the conspiracy aspect of things. I think that's been done to death. But um, it's probably the best example to talk about extreme acts of altruism. I mean, this flies in the face of Darwin. I don't understand why people are still perpetuating Darwinism and survival of the fittest. When you look at something like 9/11, it's like people willingly giving their lives up to like the firemen trying to save one more life. They just want to go and save one more life. Um, it's not, it's counterintuitive, and it's the opposite to Darwinism. I just don't get why, you know, Darwinism is such a strong concept today. It's such a rock solid, hardcore concept that's not going away, even though it's been disproved from an ancient alien hypothesis to hominoids to physical data or whatever. You know, it's like it just keeps on going. And in an altruistic sense, you know, when you see things like that and you see extreme altruism, it's just mind bending, and it's great to see. That's what makes us human. It's a wonderful thing.
Mm. Well, we are hardwired to survive. We are hardwired to procreate. We are hardwired to continue. You know, the continuance lies within our genetic push forward.
Sure.
And I don't think anybody really is questioning the theories that have helped to shape our better understanding of it. I just wonder if perhaps we are in a time when a lot of these theories that have stood the test of time need to be reevaluated. And in doing so, with perhaps a different perspective, with the reflection of how we have managed as a global culture for the last several centuries. I mean, what can we learn from the past instead of, you know, what do we need to stop? And all that stuff has to be looked at. And who's doing that? The military-industrial complex? Sure, we can trust them.
Yeah.
I mean, why are we allowing these leaderships around this world to define the way that we're supposed to come into this world and believe? When you talk about children haven't learned morality, that just proves that whatever we imprint onto their very, very fertile minds becomes a reality by way of looking around at our adults that we have on this planet. And, you know, we just need to create, I think, a better structure or a better flowchart that explains all of this from more of an intuitive, synchronistic, and interconnectedness that we just simply don't seem to promote in today's world. 9/11 gave a lot of opportunities for people to show acts of kindness. It also showed a lot of opportunity for people to be bloodthirsty for revenge. And based on that act of energetic emotional energy, we went to war. We're still at war 14 years later. And what have we accomplished? We've lost a tremendous amount of freedoms. Our laws have changed. We have gone in a direction that's really quite bizarre. Some people say that it has been predicted. Some people say we've been slowly moving through it. But and that's all fine. But the point is we're still here, and we still have a choice to be able to say, 14 years later on 9/11, am I going to connect to the sadness and the trauma of the event, which is being expertisely ingrained into your makeup in every way possible. Um, and whoever was behind 9/11 was a mastermind genius because they created a kind of conscious cognitive code that goes into the human brain and activates a tremendous amount of emotional chemistry that really does change your body. In fact, it's the premise of my whole theory behind Love Breathe for Earth. When you can attach yourself to your loving memories, just like PTSD attaches itself to the traumatic memories, we all have a kind of 9/11 PTSD because we all have been exposed to the information, whether we saw it in person or not. I saw I saw the plane hit the second tower, and now 14 years later, here I am on the air talking about it because I have seen a lot of people's lives changed for the better or for the worse. I have watched my country that I live in deteriorate into a global, just a state. It's just ridiculous here. I wish you could come here, James, and see how bad it is.
Wow.
So we've lost a lot of that, but still, yeah, the human being can get through that and conjure up these abilities to love, connect, share, be kind. We just need to kind of tip the scales on that larger level so that we start seeing it reflected back to us in the structure changes in the world.
Yeah, and there's a good point is the nurturing aspect, Hillary. I mean, you can look at altruism and you can say, yeah, we have extreme altruism that only comes up in either, maybe not necessarily life-threatening events, or maybe it's a disaster zone where you see acts of kindness where people have lost their homes in hurricanes and stuff like that. I mean, that type of disaster, not necessarily a terrorist attack, but you can see extreme altruism come down, and I think it's an innate ability in people to the problem is that you only see it in a negative situation. That's when it presents itself, and we shouldn't need to go there. However, that is the reality of it. And then you have the other opposite to it. You have psychopathology, and I'm talking about politicians right through to militaries to all acts of psychopathology. I mean, just literally being guiltless towards a fellow human being when you know you're doing wrong. It's like, I don't care what the act is. It's lost like, I don't think we all have to turn around and run around and be heroes as well. I don't think, everybody needs to be an altruistic hero. I think there are people that are programmed towards that. I look at firefighters or doctors or something. I think it's in them. There's a psychological makeup there that they either want to do that or chemically they feel good for after doing it. Some people can just sit and watch news and that doesn't matter. They're just objects on the screen, and it's like there's nothing wrong with the people. They're not bad people. They just switch off to it. So I think it's a very complex thing to look at, and I think you have people that are extremely prone to it and extremely prone to being psychopaths, and then you have the people in the middle that have a switch off thing. And I think that's what we're trying to talk about here, is there's a complexity there. It's not just as simple as being I'm altruistic today and or I'm egoist the next day. Or I think there's a nurturing thing there, and it's a societal structure that needs to embody that love into the society in every way, and to teach and educate, and not in a, like I say, in a heroism way. And I come back to that, but in more of a subtle philosophy on, do to others as you expect them to do to you type of thing. To be kind to others and to think of them. Everybody's our brother and sister, and I always call people brother as well and sister. That's what I'm like, and I try to respect people like that, because we are all brothers of the planet. However, therein lies a problem too, because the societal structure that we have plays on that altruism, and they give this heroism aspect. I look over here and the British military, everybody's heroes that's in the British military. They're all heroes for signing up, and I just don't get that. Because they're going to sit there and pull a trigger and fight for somebody else's war that they don't even understand. It's not a protection of their country. Okay, they're sitting there fighting wars with America, and it's one thing to protect your country, but how many wars have been perpetuated in the last 50 years without, a good outcome? It's all been done on their banners and flags and heroism, but it's not a heroic deed. It's one thing if your country's invaded, or it's one thing to try and protect your borders from. The military can be a very good force. They can, build roads and bridges, and they can do wonderful things. They could. They do heroic deeds now and again. They have that ability in them as an entity. But there is that societal structure, and I think whether you're talking Britain or America, you're looking at a system or a societal structure that's hardwired for non-altruistic behavior, although they will turn out and make themselves out to be humanitarianism and giving aid to countries and all. That's all a scam. I mean, 90% of the aid money goes to administration, and how much of the aid money actually gets to where it needs to go? It's like there's a superficial societal structure pretending that there's an altruistic agenda, and it's far from it. That's the way I see it. Maybe that's a bit negative or cynical.
No, I think you hit on a really good point, and it's important the viewers can get a lot of different perspectives for this topic because it's so big, and it affects us in so many different ways. I think ultimately it comes down to the integrity within the heart. We all have this human potential that's a seed, and how we nurture that seed or don't nurture that seed is really up to us ultimately, because regardless of what our conditions are, no matter how bad or how good they may be, we still have to make that conscious choice for ourselves. It belongs to us. That moment belongs to each individual person. If I meet you as a stranger walking on the street and I have a moment to say hello, or I have a moment to just ignore you and look the other way and pretend like I don't see you and keep walking. So is that a microcosmic example of a larger military example? Maybe, I don't know, but I believe that the microscopic and the macroscopic always match itself. I think the more people practice being kind to themselves and to others, it makes for that, brain transition to impregnate yourself with that kind of energy that you will seek versus not seeking it. I don't know, James. I mean, what do you think? What do you think is the solution to this? I mean, how do you see military actions changing? How do you see individual actions changing? I mean, what's your viewpoint on the bridge to cover the gap?
Education and awareness, and awareness comes with education, but you can't give awareness to people. I mean, I grew up in Northern Ireland, and I've seen acts of hatred, and I wouldn't call them psychopathic acts, but definitely, yeah, that too, but not across the board. I mean, you're looking at a nation here that was educated to hate each other, very sectarian divided. It's no different to Palestine and Israel. It's just the same thing. Two different entities, never going to be on the same hymn sheet, singing. And they just been educated to hate each other, and you're only one generation away, Hillary. You're only one generation away from not being a totally different entity, And yes, that doesn't mean you're going to get to educate everybody to a new philosophy in one generation. That's the realism of that is it's a difficult thing. But you see people like Martin Luther King and the momentum that he had, and the quick turnaround that can have. You don't know when the massive change is going to come. You don't know when the massive sway of public opinion and public consciousness is going to come about. So the only thing you can do is put the infrastructure in place, and that is through education. And I could easily be sectarian. I could easily be one side or the other here, but I don't. I don't choose to be. I treat every person as I meet them, and I've intelligently done that myself on my own. But I know that there are, groups here of people that just it's in them to educate them, families and their groups and their siblings to hate each other. Not their family. I mean the ones from across a political divide, a religious divide. And I say to anybody, I don't care what country you're from or what religion. Knock yourself out. Without, if you want to follow a flag, you want to go and follow a god, fine. It's not me. It's not my thing. I hate flags. I think flags are nonsense. I'm born on planet Earth. I wasn't born in Ireland. I wasn't born in Britain. I wasn't born in America. I don't care. I honestly don't care about flags and countries. I'm patriotic to the earth that I'm on right now in Ireland, and I'm patriotic to this island, and I think it's a beautiful place. Well, I'm not patriotic to no government, and I'm not patriotic to no flag. I didn't get any choice in the matter. People don't get choice whether they're Israeli or whether they're, Dutch or German. They just born there, and that's it. And it's bizarre.
So have you felt that your whole life? Have you felt that your whole life? Have you felt that sense of independence from that kind of structure?
Yeah. I grew up with people, and I wasn't allowed to go to school with people. Well, not from my parents. I mean, my parents aren't like that. So I've been educated in my home to a good philosophy and a good way to treat everybody as my brother and sister. However, I mean, in groups or peer pressure and stuff like that, I wasn't supposed to have certain friends because they're from a different religion, or I was like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. It's like, it's just the way I am, and it's like,
So would that be ingrained in your genetic makeup, perhaps, or
I
would
always
that
wonder
be?
that. I always wonder that. I don't know. I just know that it's like I often say to you, and it's and I see this in others sometimes. I say to you every time I come through London, and it's like I lift people's bags upstairs. You got to understand the tube system in London. It's so archaic. It's not. It's so difficult to get around. And I actually had somebody do what I do, a little altruistic act, and I had a trunk with me in my studio equipment, and it must have been 35 kilos. It's like, I don't know what that is, 5 stone or something like. It was heavy. It was like heavy, and I had to go up these stairs, and it's like the tube system's about 150 years old or whatever it is. But this guy helps me, and I'm like, wow, this is what I normally do in London. It's like, and it was nice. So there are people out there doing it, and you see them. They just it's what the reason I pointed out is that they don't think about doing it. They don't sit there and study you for about a minute and go, I better go and help that person. It's just they turn around and it's an instant reaction and they do it. And then you see people that are just so ignorant and they walk past, and especially women and older women and pregnant women. I just it's bizarre that people can just walk by with their shields up. They're like got blinkers on, It's like don't see anything.
And where does that come from? Where do you think that comes
I
from?
just think it's inherently in me, and I guess I've had that nurturing from my family to not just be altruistic, but to be morally good as well. There's a morality thing too. So I think the morality and society and your education and that nurturing is all important. It can be that deciding factor that makes you altruistic or psychopathic. I mean, if you're born into a sectarian country that's told to hate everybody, you could be against the odds, to be the most altruistic person. And we've had cases of that, especially here in Northern Ireland, where people have testified against other people because they just don't want to do it. It's not inherently in them. It's not inherently in them to hate another person or to. And it's the same in Palestine and Israel. I mean, Palestine and Israel, by the way, they used to live in harmony in the 1940s. And there's been a sectarian, psychopathic control grid put in front of them, since the 40s, and that they're almost like a supremacists, and that's a whole other ball game. But I mean, it's not inherently in people to be bad, but there are people that are hardwired. And here's the thing: there is a similarity between altruism and psychopathology. Is that they are both hardwired in the same way, but for different reasons. So it's like they will break a rule, or they will do something, an extreme act, to achieve something. So it's like they're being psychologically programmed. So there's a chemical thing there. There has to be something there chemically. I think there's that too, but there is a nurturing. I mean, I don't think everybody is born to be a psychopath or an extreme altruistic, i.e. giving up your life for another. I mean, some people won't necessarily do that. I mean, it doesn't happen in many cases in the animal kingdom. In dogs it does. I mean, when you look at like deers, I mean, they're sitting there, and lions will come. They know the game's up. They've got their baby, and it's like they're gonna, they sit and watch, like, and they won't put their life in front of it. It's not something. There are other, you put that in front of a human, it's a different story. There's cases of dogs that have just died. I mean, there was a case there about a year ago where a dog walker collapsed, and he'd hurt himself, but he died, and then the dog lay down. The dog could have walked out there. The dog lay down and died with him. Like, there is some cases in the animal kingdom, but it's what makes us totally different. I don't think we're hardwired for it. I think maybe we're hardwired to be prototypes, whether that's proto-altruistic or proto-psychopaths. I just don't think it's inherently in us to be anything. I think there's always free will, and there's always that nurturing, and the nurturing is key. The nurturing can be in society, I'm talking about, not just one-to-one. It's what swings it. It's what swings the vote.
Yeah, you make a good point with that. It's interesting because when I think of psychopath, I think of somebody who has no problem taking life from people. They have no problem, putting a person in a position where they feel so bad about themselves that they commit suicide, or they actually go out and kill somebody, or take life from somebody, or encourage others to do that as well. I see Hey.
We lost video.
I see that.
Welcome to live TV.
Are we back on?
Well, I have no video, but I got your picture.
Okay. It looks like it's trying to connect with me, so maybe it'll pop up. Okay, so I can continue?
Sure.
I think we have a responsibility to be careful in how we throw around labels, how we, we just have to be mindful. I think it comes down to being mindful. It comes down to, are we responsible human beings with ourselves and with others, or do we walk around pointing fingers at other people? And, that could be declared as kind of an egotistical quality when we get caught up in the rapture of, destroying somebody else for whatever reason. Is it our ego that captures onto a concept or a thought or a theory that can be seen as kind of almost like, trying to murder somebody energetically or spiritually, or even in other aspects of that? How do we determine, what's the cause and effect? Is it my ego making me see this? Is it my inability to see something clearly? Psychopaths don't necessarily see their own behavior sometimes, but yet it's very clear to other people all the way across the board that their actions are aligned with hateful intentions. Hateful intentions, I believe, is a force, a literal force, that moves through people on a soul level. And, how does murdering somebody or taking somebody's life, however that happens, how does that affect the soul quality? In my experience and in my background, the areas of work that I have been in, I have seen these kinds of things manifest very interestingly in different circumstances. It could be said that there was a force behind 9/11 that caused 9/11 to happen. It could be said that there's a force behind Joe Schmo over there who's throwing nothing but insults and gossip out into the world to, make its way around to poison the waters. I mean, really, it depends on what version we take of this ego type act, or the being the act of kindnesses do the same thing. So loving people create loving energy, hateful people create hateful energy. We are not just a biological body form that has no illumination within with spirit, and oftentimes intellectual conversations negate or just flat out dismiss the energetic qualities of a human being that intuitives like myself, and that's everybody can do, is you feel that. When you sit down in a room next to someone who's angry, You know when you're being ignored or dismissed. You know when people are treating you certain ways. You know, before you declare yourself a psychopath or someone else, make sure you're not surrounded by a bunch of assholes who make it that way because they themselves have not done the work to clear their own shit.
Sure. I mean,
Dare I say that on the air?
you're fine. You know, for me, I've always seen just psychopaths as, and I throw the word around psychopaths because I don't look at it like somebody has to take a life. Psychopaths means psycho is to do with the mind, and pathology is to do with the death of the mind. And the ultimate death of the mind is to not feel guilt for something. I mean, because if you don't have guilt, you don't have anything. It's an unusual emotion, because if you don't feel guilt, you don't. It doesn't. Nothing will prevent you from doing anything. In other words, if you want to be immoral to somebody or something, guilt is what stops you. And if you don't have that guilt firewall up there and blocking you from doing something, well, then you're going to go out and act whatever way you want to towards another, and that may be also to take a life. That's the most extreme act of not feeling guilt, and that's why psychopaths will end up either in that position, whether they do it with a pen or the stroke of a a contract from a military perspective, or whether that's done from a political standpoint or on the battlefield, or just somebody who just is a pure stereotypical serial killer. I mean, what drives them to be that person is the slowly becoming they're a proto-psychopath, and what happens is they will either tend towards this crossover point where they go, that's it, no more guilt anymore, I'll do what I want, and that's when they make that crossover point. And the thing is, I mean, if you think about that, everybody has a level where they don't feel guilt towards something. I mean, you put a family out there, okay, and they've got a family to feed, and they want to go and steal a loaf of bread to feed their family. Are they going to feel guilt about that? No, they're not going to feel that. They're going to say, okay, my family's fed today, okay? So everybody, and that's a point just to note, like, I mean, everybody has a crossover point. Some people will feel no guilt towards a company, but they feel guilt towards a person, so they don't feel guilt. So you have a special branch of sociopathology where they don't feel guilt towards society, but they do feel guilt towards people, and it's bizarre. So it's like all psychopaths are sociopaths, but not all sociopaths are psychopaths. It's not a two-way system, like. So it's every level of guilt is in there. I mean, right up the charts, up to the ultimate thing. So it's just the difference is that psychopaths, once they cross over that point of no return, they have no guilt at all, and that's the scary thing. And being altruistic, I think it's a nurturing thing. I don't think you have to be that proto-altruistic guy. You don't think you have to be that person. I think you can do it through a nurturing process, and I think it's a societal thing as well. I think it's also subjugation of the ego. So when I say altruism versus egoism, I think, yes, the egoism needs to be addressed and diminished, and taught that you can't get rid of it. Either nurture it for what it is. In other words, the ego is not a bad thing, Hillary. I mean, the ego, when you're a kid, the ego makes you do things that you wouldn't normally do. It'll tell you you're bigger than you are, or you're better than you are, and you'll put yourself in a position and you go, uh-oh, I shouldn't be here. And that's when you learn. You learn that you either do it different the next time, or that you're too big for your boots, and you subjugate yourself as a result, and the ego teaches you something. However, it also pushes you in positions where you wouldn't normally have learned something. So there is a positive aspect to the ego too.
Sure.
So I say egoism, drop it down a level. Society needs to be nurturing again and bring back this, a good deed thing. I mean, I want to bring a case, and I told you about this in the preparation for the show. In 2007, there was a guy called Wesley Autry, a 50-year-old construction worker. He's sitting on the tracks in New York's subway, and a guy falls onto the tracks, having an epileptic fit. He was just his body was going into convulsions, And the guy, he jumped onto the tracks and held them down in between the tracks with a train passing over him with just about an inch to spare. And he had even a daughter with him. He had somebody there on the tracks with him, his own daughter, and he said to somebody, "Can you take care of my daughter? I have to go and do something." And like, I mean, that is the true act of. So you don't have to put your life. Yes, he put his life on the line, but he knew too that nobody else was going to do it, and the guy was in trouble. I mean, and the fact that he had a daughter with him too, just ramped up the stakes for him a bit more, because he was going to, if he didn't, didn't save the day, he's left a daughter behind in the hands of a stranger, like. But he weighed up the situation in an instant and did it. It's just one of the most amazing acts of altruism outside 9/11, obviously, that we talked about. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't just the firemen too, and that's another thing about 9/11. It wasn't just the firemen. It was, individuals. There's many heroic stories of 9/11 where individuals, and I just think it's in the human race. It's what depicts us as human. It's a wonderful thing. But like I say, I think the thing to maybe wrap up on is that there's multitudes to it. It's not just being altruistic one day and then not the next. It's very easy to be psychopathic in terms of not feeling guilt in this society today, because that's what you're being told to do. You switch off, you watch people get killed on telly every day, and you go and eat your dinner, okay? Then you brush your teeth and you go to bed, and you're safe because you're in the Western world, and that's what we're taught in this Western civilization, and that all the other people on the telly are just information, and they're not to be worried about. So that's not nurturing. That's nurturing you to be a psychopath. So awareness, education, that societal element, and then the egoism. I mean, it's all a multitude of things, and it is complex in a way. But like I say, I don't think we all have to be out there being altruistic heroes. Yes, be that if the situation arises and you're comfortable with it. Of course, do it. But I think it's a very complex situation, and education is the key.
Yeah, and I'd like to say in closing too, if you don't mind, that it's really an individual journey, and we shouldn't be quick to judge other people for what they choose. And the compassion element is the missing element. And if we are quick to dismiss somebody's experience or the way that they move through life and what's made them who they are, then we're missing a vital element, and then the judgment itself comes from a person's own ego, who then looks at something and says, well, that person is this, this, and this. I want to end today on a positive note, and I don't want people thinking, "Oh my God, am I looking like a psychopath? Does so and so think I'm a psychopath?" I mean, that's not the energy I would want to leave this recording on. So I think it's important to end on a compassionate note, not to be so judging. Let God judge, and we can make that individual interaction what we need to make it, as far as what we're guided to make it, because my belief system isn't the same as yours necessarily, or other people's, and we have to respect those differences, and we have to seek to understand them and find compassion for that, or better understanding if we don't have a full understanding of something, and then we go from there. So 9/11 is a perfect opportunity for us to take a look at ourselves first, to see how, and self-observe, and just put ourselves together before we start to say, this world is a bunch of psychopaths, but not me. So I mean, really, you can't say that about somebody else and not have looked at yourself first, and that's what's really important. And acts of kindness, whether they're heroes or not, I mean, they all have an element of energy that moves out into the world in a positive way. So go for it.
Sure. Oh, well, I'll leave it at that, Hilary. It's a nice note to finish on, and I thank you for your time again today. We're going to catch you in the not too distant future, Hilary.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.